Hello, 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 hello. This is Dr. Andrea Little Mason, affectionately known as Dr. Doula. And oh my goodness, you all know I'm back with another Birth Her Story conversation. And today I am talking to Moji. Now, Moji you're originally from Benin, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes. And so I when I was scrolling through someone else's page, and I had one of a sister I've interviewed before, Divine. I looked and I knew she had gone to Benin earlier this year, but I looked down a page. I was like, "Who is Moji?" And I saw that Moji was, as she was sitting there, I think she was sitting with some midwives, and I'm following the path, and then I see, oh, she's hosting trips to Benin. What? And she's reconnecting, and I'm just screaming like, oh my gosh, oh my goodness. And I go, and now I follow down the rabbit hole, and I find out things about Moji, and I'm like, oh, she's a homeschooler and an unschooler. And I homeschooled and unschooled for 13 whole years, when it really, when it was Black people don't do that, when that was the big mantra, or we don't do that. And there are just so many things. I know that you talk to people even about their diets and different things that you dealt with, and that you advocate for. You are helping to reconnect people in whatever kind of way. I'm just gonna let you tell us who you are. I am so excited to share Moji with you. I'm so glad that I was guided to her, because she's doing amazing things. Moji, please tell everybody who you are.
Hi, thank you so much. Man, actually, you know what? I think you were in South Africa not long
Yes.
while they were, yes, because that's
Yes.
around the time I connected with you on Facebook. And I was like, man, I wish you would come over here. I wish you would come here too. And I love that
Wait.
you were doing the same things. Yeah.
Moji, oh my gosh. Listen, I went, and when I saw you hosting 2 trips for next year, man, I was like, how did I miss this? What is it? One is in January, one is in May.
Yes. April, May. But
Okay.
there'll be more.
Well, continue. Introduce yourself to the people.
So yes, okay. So yes, I am an unschooler, which means that I am unlearning a lot of things that I've learned through the society and through the school system. So, and I'm self-directed. I'm a doula. I don't love that name, but I that's the best way to kind of describe myself, where people will understand that I'm a birth worker. And I am also I am a passionate about the gut and the womb. So I'm all about nutrition and also the womb of just our center of women especially. And so in with my work, I am also from Benin, but I grew up in the US. So I call myself an American African. So, but now I'm coming back to Benin to kind of reconnect my, with birth work here, which is something that I was I wasn't connected to, but I was born at home in this house where I am right now, and so I've always had that draw to birth work. But I was trying to make it work in the U.S., but spirit kept pushing me out, and pushing me right back here to just reconnect um, but not leave my sisters in Turtle Island, but just to connect with them on a different level, on a different with different services. And so that's how I started to host the retreat, the birth education retreat, which is where I bring people from the diaspora, women birth workers, to Benin to meet with and share with, and in knowledge and in spirit and in everything, with birth workers here. So it's an education retreat in that sense, but it's also a spiritual retreat because Benin is has deep histories in even pre slave trade, but also during the slave trade, and so people come here for all of that, for spiritual reasons, for birth education, and also just to relax and to connect back with Africa. So those are all the things I do with my work: nutrition, ancestral knowledge, and womb work. Mhm.
Wow. And I saw Divine's pictures and I was like, because sometimes when we go, um, especially as Black Americans here, African Americans, that whatever people call themselves, I do try to explain to people that often when I travel or go somewhere, interact with different people on the continent, that African American is almost, from my experience, been identified like a tribe. It's like, oh, that's where you're from. Like everybody's from somewhere. Everybody's connected to something. And the people that, but then they would look at me and say, well, you're different than what I've seen of those African Americans.
Mm.
You're different. I didn't think that was what, you were like. But I saw the pictures, and I know a lot of times one of the things that people are accused of is, it's like when you go and you travel somewhere on the continent, you say, oh, you go to the sexy places, you go where,
Mhm.
you know, you go where everything is, it's,
It's removed from the towns. It's kind of like in that, yeah,
and
tourist
I,
resorty places.
I saw where you took them when she would just take lip, honey, I was like, that's where I need to be right there.
And that's how I really wanted it to be, because I don't want people coming here to go to a resort. For me, when I travel, I want to be with the people. And also, I feel like if I want to bring people here, they need to come and be with the people,
That's
because
right.
that's where the heart is. And really, to me, if you come here and you're just expecting to be in a fancy hotel and things like that, you're gonna miss everything. You're just gonna
Everything.
miss everything, all the culture, all the realness, and all the real connecting. And what I want to do is, with these with the birth education retreat, with the Wise African Woman retreats, is to really connect people. And it's not just to come here and see, take pictures and go. I want people to connect, to feel like, and really to feel like they can come here and even have a home here,
Yeah.
and maybe repatriate if they want to, but just to feel like they can actually live here. Because, and to just get the feeling of how it is to actually just live here, to communicate what kind of things they need to be aware of, and to be able to live here. It's just yeah, I want people to connect. I'm not planning resort trips.
You know,
But we
I
do have fun. We
yeah,
have fun and we go to the beach. We have do, but it's not. It's a real connection kind of retreat.
it's one of the greatest gifts that could have ever been. When I first went to South Africa, I was going for a birth exchange. And so, but my sister, I mean, the end of it is that I actually found and made family there. I mean, family there, we go back there, like, because we connected, we made a
Mhm.
connection. But my sister had a death in the family the second day I was there. And we had all these things lined up. I was supposed to see certain things and do whatever. And I ended up going. She's like, my cousin died. And
Hmm.
you know and she's and even in that, like, learning what that meant, she was like, umsebenzi means work. And she said that word. I said, well, that means work. She said, well, yeah, that's what happens when, it's not just when someone dies, when someone's married, whenever we're doing, we come together and we take care of each other. And that was actually, it I went from a semi, like, I'm gonna be kind of close to the people kind of thing, to being with the people. and everything, in situations where I didn't know what was going on. But what happened, Moji, was because I had nothing else to lean on. I said, wait a minute. And for me, I started feeling the connections that we had, even though the majority of my ancestry comes from West Africa. I saw the connection to Africa. I saw the way things were done when you weren't
Mm-hmm.
in that whatever place. When we went to the township, I saw how they
Right.
did things, and then all of a sudden, I was like, that was my realization that we really are African. Like it's in
Mm.
us. It's in us. And I saw the connections. So when I
Mm-hmm.
saw the images and the pictures, my heart just leapt, and I was like, why didn't I know? How did I miss Moji? How did I miss what Moji was doing with these educational retreats? How did I miss that? Because part of the work that I do while I, educate and share what I learn is to continually look for those connections. Because when you experience it for yourself, and this is the gift in what you're doing, when you experience it for yourself, no one can take that from you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
No one,
Exactly.
no one can do that.
Yes.
How did, go ahead.
Go ahead. Ask me the question.
I was going to say, how did you get, was birth always a part of what you did? Or
Mm.
how did you get to that space, with all these other things, like you said, nutrition and
Mm-hmm.
you're unschooling your daughter and things. How did you get to the womb part of it? And then
Yes.
how did that translate into saying, you know, I want to bring some people back with me?
Yes.
And you're there,
So
and you're there now, right?
yes, I'm here now. Mm-hmm.
And how long have you
And
been there now?
I'm staying. I've been here since April.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So yes, and I'm planning to stay. So so my family moved to the U.S. When I was 9, and so we all moved there, and so that was a very strange cultural shock for me as a 9-year-old. Um, and and then but I've always, even while there, because while here we didn't learn much about Black Americans or African Americans. We didn't really learn. When you see about the US, it's always magazines or whatever. It was always white people. It's changed now. I noticed that
Yeah.
it's changed now, because now it's a lot of pop culture that comes here in the media. It's
Yeah.
a lot of the music and everything. It's changed. But when I was young, it was snow and white people. That's all I knew about the U.S. And so, um,
Did you
and
speak
so,
English? Did you speak English already?
no, I didn't. I spoke Yoruba and I spoke Fon. And so those are my two main languages. And so I had to learn. They were teaching us, because we also lived a bit in Nigeria, and they taught us English a bit, but I hated English. I wasn't good at it. And so it wasn't something that I was speaking up easily. And so it was when we moved that I had to, do the English as a second language classes, and really immerse myself through school and learn the language. And since then, that kind of started my journey with my relationship with Black people in the US. And it was up and down, but I've always wanted to connect with the Black people in the US. Like, it wasn't something that came like that, because it wasn't something like that came very easily, but it was definitely something that in my heart, I always knew that I needed to do. And so, that's that. In schooling, when I went to college, I in high school, I was in this program that was all white anyway, but then I went to college. I was like, I gotta connect with my people. So I entered this organization that was for women of color. And so that really started my journey with working with women of color specifically. And but college schooling has always been something for me. I love to learn, but I couldn't. I just with school, it felt like I was banging my head on a on a brick wall, and I was being held back from what I really want to do in one ways, and then I was also like being insulted it was just like my head was cloudy in school. But then I was in it because I felt like, my family was just like, you just got to go to school. That's just how it is. But so I was in college for a while before I realized, man, I'm here getting into debt and not graduating. And I'm not going anywhere. And so I ended up finally being honest with myself and quitting school. And when I quit school, I started working at a daycare. And so at the daycare is when I started thinking about med school, because I would talk to moms. I got really into talking to moms about their births. They'll tell me, I've always been one of those people that people talk to me a lot about their lives.
Yeah.
And so they'll tell me about their experiences. That's when I started seeing people breastfeed more, because here I saw when I was growing up, breastfeeding was just everywhere, done, whatever. It wasn't a big deal. And I didn't really think about it until I started working at a daycare, and it was a big deal for me to see someone breastfeeding. I was like, it's because I haven't seen it in years. Literally, I've spent like 10 years in these United States and rarely see a person breastfeeding. And so, that's when things started to click to me. And since I was born at home, I always heard my birth stories, but I always thought, even because I've been in the US for so long, you go to the hospital to birth. So I was like, I'll be a doctor. And then I started hearing women telling me about the midwives and how they had births with a midwife and all that. That's where I started. So I talked to one of the moms, connected me with her midwife, and I shadowed her for a day. Lord, at the end of the day, I was in love. I actually told her I love you at the end of the day, because I witnessed the birth when I was with her, and I was like, this is it. It was just like, I know because you get this high up of life, and you just like, wow, and so that's when I was like, I'm doing midwifery. And so and then I also got into what's that white woman? Yes. What's that? Yeah.
Anime guys, gas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Her book. Her
Mm-hmm.
book. Spiritual Midwifery.
Spiritual. Yes, that one.
Yes. That one also, I started reading that because the daycare I worked at was a lot of white women. So that's what was given to me. That's how I got connected to midwifery in the US. And so I loved her book, and I've learned after that it's not all that, but
but that was
it was a good introduction into birth and into natural birth and into like the politics that's involved in birth in the US,
Yes.
And so I loved that, and I was like, all right. So I moved to Miami to go to a midwifery school over there. There's a midwifery school over there where you basically live there and you work, and it's called International School of Midwifery, and it was pretty popular. They had a show on that.
Where was it?
Discovery Health, Miami.
Miami. Okay.
Yes, it's in Miami. They had a show on Discovery Health. The woman was kind of midwives, but so I went there for a year, and then I got pregnant while I was there. I met up with my daughter's dad. We went to college together, and then he moved to Miami, and so I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, oh, so that was they told us in the beginning of midwifery school, probably 5 of you gonna get pregnant, and I didn't think it was gonna be me, but it was. It was me, and so it was assumed, because I was in a midwifery school, that I was going to birth at the clinic, and I've always dreamt of having a home birth. That's just how I always imagined my birth. people imagine their weddings. I never even thought of ever going to a birthing in a hospital. Never wasn't something to me that I could even imagine, because I also have a very weird um, in relationship with doctors and hospitals because of my experience. I hate needles. And
Mm-hmm.
as a kid, I was forced, literally like held down at the in clinics and to be given shots, like
Yes.
really. And so I've always just been like, this is not the space for me. And then even being in the US, it was usually, when you're going to a doctor, it's usually a white male, which is something that I'm just really not comfortable with at all. It's just something. So
Wait,
even though
I'm just gonna say, like, you're saying all these things, and I just have to say, you know, like, especially the last point, you know, it's just normally white men. Like, we you say that almost as if well, it's just this thing with me. And I think there are a lot of people that have a thing, but they just don't identify it because
right
they
now,
did
that's a word.
you figured out, oh, that's the issue I have. But you
Hmm.
know, just that whole context of, you
Yes.
know, evolving or devolving to a place where we go from being surrounded by women that look like us and support us in a certain way to now um, predominantly still birthing with individuals that historically have been the oppressive force. Now,
Mhm.
I mean, that doesn't mean that so and so didn't have a great doctor. I've had wonderful doctors. That's not the point. The point
Exactly.
is that, you know, women in general, white or black or any of them, are still fighting for these certain spaces in this male dominated area that has to do with birth.
Mhm.
And there is something to that. So I just had to affirm what you were saying. You know, there's something to
Yes.
that. There's a
Mhm.
reason to feel a kind of way about that.
Yes. And you're right that these things that people feel, sometimes they can't name it. They can't, and that's something that I don't know. I feel like it's more the inner work that we have to do individually that would point you to exactly what it is that would point you to it, and then that will make you feel comfortable enough to say that's it. Because sometimes, we feel like the hospital is supposed to be the best, and also our fears are like, oh, but what if this, and I need to be here. But fears and all that make you ignore the fact that you're a little uncomfortable, and to just to push you into that space as if, and to make you think you are safer, but when you're actually not.
Let me
Yeah.
let me
So.
let me interject again, you know, on that point that you just made. You know, I've been reading and studying and doing some things and looking at some things. And the truth of the matter is the whole concept and the notion of safety, you know, there's a great cognitive dissonance around that because statistically, you can even look back historically in the United States and when they were making this shift for Black women to these majority culture uh, clinics and hospitals, the higher incidences of maternal mortality and infant mortality were happening in hospitals. They were not
Yes.
happening at home with the quote unquote illiterate, whatever label they wanted to
Hmm.
put on
Hmm.
midwives.
Yes.
They weren't. That's people. That's not based in. People always want to talk about evidence-based things. That's not based in the evidence. There
Mm-mm.
was not more safety for Black women when they were in the hospital. Now, I will
Hmm.
acknowledge that because we've removed ourselves often so far from the birth experience in a physiological way with, you know, understanding how our bodies work, I'll admit that we're misplaced. We've distanced ourselves. But the notion that somehow for Black women, the hospital meant more safety and meant health and was not one of the things that we point back to as saying this is when we started seeing maternal mortality rate
Exactly. Go
increase.
up. Yes, and that's the
So
thing with the storytelling and how we need to be very careful not to say people didn't go to the hospitals because they were not, Black women didn't go to hospitals because they were not allowed. No, they
No,
didn't go because that's not their culture.
that's
That wasn't what they were used to. They didn't go because they knew somebody who could come to their house and serve them and be their midwife and care for them. That's why they didn't go. And then those people were removed to
exactly,
force them into the into
exactly.
the clinics and the hospitals. So it wasn't. We had to be really careful. And I when I am someone who started being very careful about the way I talk about it too, because not to repeat the stories that the system has taught us, as
Exactly.
in, oh, everything is like, oh, until we allowed and then they did this. It wasn't all about being allowed. It was also because we were doing our own thing, and then
Yeah.
that was
Ooh,
removed to push us into, now you're allowed to come with us.
thank you
So
for that.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for saying it in that way, because I say it in a different way, but I like the fact that you pointed that out. Um,
Hmm.
because that is one of the things that's becoming more solid in me. The fact that the culture of what we were doing was also protective for us. The way we did the things we were doing was protective. It was protecting and preserving our lives. And we
Hmm.
got integrated and assimilated into a system that was unhealthy to start with, that was killing people to start with, that was unsafe. But when we tell their narrative, or the one that's been passed on to us, you know, we do have to be mindful and make sure that we identify it as, no, it was an actual culture. There was a
Hmm.
culture, a way of doing things. I read something where it was talking about the old our old granny midwives grand midwives, where they were talking about, oh yeah, you got to watch out for them that bring that magic stuff from West Africa, that devil magic from West Africa. Interesting. Interesting. And they were putting this stuff in medical journals. They were
Yeah.
systematically doing this thing. So thank you for letting me interject. I want to continue to hear your story, but
Hmm.
I love that. It's so
Hmm.
important. Go ahead,
Yeah,
sis.
and what you said about these things are in medical journals is what part of why I unschool, because a lot of things that we're saying, oh, but you're so educated, how can you they think that? Or but that was education. That was the people who are educating us, and who are, that was education. Anyway,
Exactly.
so let me continue with my story about my birth work. So when I was pregnant, I ended up, so I wanted a home birth, but I was in a space where first everybody thought I was gonna go in the clinic, but the clinic was also, it was, the energy there was not something that where I felt like I would be in control. Because it's weird to birth with your teachers and the director, because they're the ones now who you just will. It's the power dynamics. It's just
Yeah.
gonna be like the hospital where you give up your power to them because that's what you're used to. And also then my relationship with my daughter's father got very bad. He got to domestic violence issues and just emotional. And by this time, I knew that in order to, because I've already helped so many women have natural birth at the clinic, at the birth center, I knew that I needed a mental space where I wasn't um, scared, where I wasn't feeling insecure. I knew that now. And so I decided to, because I knew I couldn't, we were living together at the time, but because I knew that he couldn't provide that for me in our home there, I decided to move and to leave midwifery school. And so I moved back to Gainesville, which is where I was before. Um, to birth there. My mom had a house. I had at my mom's house there, and so everybody was like, "You're crazy. You're gonna be by yourself." and and my mom was like, "Yeah." And my whole family was really worried. They wanted me to go to the hospital, blah blah. But anyway, so I birthed at home. I had a midwife, and um, I had friends. And a lot of my friends, that was their, all of them, that was their first time seeing home birth. And so, you know, my connection to birth got even stronger with that.
Wow.
And
Was it
I
was it what
yeah.
you thought it would be? Was it what you said you know, like people, when, you know, girls would dream about their wedding day, you would dream about your, you know,
Mm,
your home birth or whatever. Was it what you anticipated that it would be, your home birth?
you, well, let's see, was it? Yeah, it was wonderful. Um it was wonderful. I had people with me that one girlfriend that I I wanted her to be there because she always makes me laugh. And so yeah, it was perfect. I couldn't have asked for anything more. Um so yeah, I definitely feel like it was everything that I thought it would be. Um and more, because you know, you never really know what's gonna happen. So yeah, it was definitely everything I hoped that it would be, for sure.
One more
And so
question.
yeah.
One other
Mhm.
question. So when you were thinking about your home birth, were you close to where your family was, your parents or anything? Were you close to where they were, or was this um away from them? Was your
It
mother?
was my mom at this point was working in New York.
Okay.
My father had we were all spread out. I was the only one, so I didn't have any blood. I had my cousin who came. He was who was a male cousin. He was the closest person there, and he's actually the one who ended up cutting the cord, and he was like so over the moon. He was like, "Oh my God, Moji!" I was like, "I can't believe you did it," and he was the one most affected by it. And so, but I'm actually, in hindsight, because at first I was really wishing that my mom could be there, and in hindsight, I'm glad that she wasn't, because I feel like she was very fearful, even though she had a home birth, but it wasn't a home birth, because my her she birthed with her father, who was a medical doctor at the
Okay.
time. And so even though it was at home, she was still very much trusting his medical doctor ways, you know. And so um midwife was something that she was like, nah, this is not, you
Got
know, she still wanted it to be a doctor to come.
got
And
you.
so I'm really glad of the way that it happened and the people that were there. You know, in hindsight, it was great. So my immediate family, my dad wasn't there, my mom wasn't there,
Were
but my
you were there, did, for the people that in the family that you created for yourself to partake in it with you, um how did you how did you like set that up? Did like you said, one of your friends, she makes you laugh. It's like, oh, she makes me
hmm
laugh. Did you prepare with them in any kind of way, or were you kind of like, I just want you to be here, or um did they know, like, okay, well, I'll look out for this for you, I'll do this for you, or I'll do that for you? How did you all do
hmm
that?
Yeah, so yes, one person, I chose her because she was doing photography, and so I wanted her to take pictures. Um, but really, we didn't do very much preparing. I just told them, I just want y'all to be there to be there to distract me, to just talk to me, and to, you know, just be there for me. And a lot of them were just excited to just, because that's, you know, they were excited to just be there. So that was about all the preparation we did.
Okay, keep going. People always, I love sharing the those who've had home births, because if I'm honest, you know, you mentioned before, we were talking before about the dynamics that are at play when you deal with healthcare and going to the hospitals, and that often there are still a predominance of white male doctors in obstetrics and things like that. And I just think we need to understand that um, when you start looking at, you know, freeing yourself everybody, sometimes people might have health conditions that they know about and things like that. But I also think some of our freedom comes from understanding that sisters like you who said, I'm going to birth that, I want to have my baby at home. One more question about that before I finish hearing your story. I told you before we started, I'm probably going to be interrupting you because I just love so much about you. But okay, so the fear thing, because that's the thing that people deal with. Like, well, what if something happens? Did that ever go through your mind? If it went through your mind, which ways did you cope with it? Because at this point we're so educated about everything. We all know everything that could ever happen wrong, and that is what we this could happen him.
Yeah.
What were your thought processes going into this? And
Yeah.
how did, and what is your way, whatever your way is, what is your way of coping with that?
Oh yes, I mean, you can't go through pregnancy without having some kind of fear, and because that's just it's part of caring for that life that you're holding. Is having all those thoughts of what could go wrong, and so I definitely, I was just telling my daughter the other day that sometimes I would be like, what if she's born without this or without that part of her body, and with something. And, you know, and that's the thing with Western culture. And this book that I was reading, I think it's called Midwifery in the South by Gertrude somebody. But she was saying that she's a Black midwife, and she was looking into how the medical system changed women. And one of the things it has changed us, like you say, is that we feel like we know we can control everything, and we cannot. People die every day in the hospitals. You can't control that. But what you can do is face it. And that's one of the things that I always talk to women about, even as a doula, is that, this is birth is life and death. But you gotta have you gotta come at it with a different mindset, with that trust, with giving it your all. I mean, really, that's what it is. It's giving it your all. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm putting all my cards on life right now, and that's it. And that's how I dealt with it, because definitely there were fears, but I was more trusting than anything. And also I had I had altars. I felt supported. It was also like, a few months after my grandmother, on my paternal grandmother passed, that I found out that I was pregnant.
Wow.
And so I felt like it was I felt connected to other protectors outside of myself and outside of obviously the medical system, So if anything was to happen, it was because it was just meant. That was how it was supposed to go. But I felt like I was protected. And also I was just ready for anything that could go wrong. You will go wrong at home.
I really think that I really thank you for sharing that, just the whole notion of other protectors, and that we are not in control. And that is one of the things, we're very litigious. I'll sue this person. I'm going to sue the doctor. Didn't they know that this was happening? Did they see that test? Did they look at the strip? Did they do whatever? And I know that I know people feel different ways about things. There is a difference, to me, there's a difference, here you put yourself in a setting, in a hospital setting. And one of the things that I notice is that the trust that happens is the trust in the system. It's like instantly, it's like, okay, I can relax. Whatever they put in that bag, I'm not asking. I don't know what they're putting, dripping into me. I don't know what is in the IV. I don't ask. It's just like, that's where the trust goes.
Yeah, like they know. As long as they know what they know,
As long
They're
they
gonna do the
got it.
best, but you don't even know. They're not
You
gonna do the best. They're gonna do what they know. They're
they're
gonna
gonna
do what
they're gonna follow their protocol. They're gonna
which
follow
has nothing to do with you.
nothing to do with you. Um, so but the letting down the guard and not understanding necessarily that I have to have other protectors, and there's a reason why people like when we talk about the midwives from the South, one of the critiques was that they were, talking about how God was helping them help this family. They knew that they were just assisting. I'm just assisting something much bigger than me. This is not my gig. And we've always had that, and people make it a negative connotation to be spiritual in whatever kind of way and to trust in that way. But I especially always like to just say to those who will birth in the hospital, there's no other time when you will go in the hospital and I say, okay, what are y'all doing now, and what are you doing here, and what are you doing there, and be really mindful of the situation. But we trust, and we make this system that has historically been antagonistic towards us, has been harmful towards us. Yes, I'm all for people working and say, hey, let's go to legislation, let's see what can change. Okay, that's fine, that's over there. Okay, that's over there. But for all of our time, we've had to know we had other protectors. We had others that were for us. And so thank you again for sharing that. Go ahead, girl. I told you.
Yes.
So
And you know what? That's something that is happening here in Benin also. I mean, probably everywhere in Africa, because it's a global thing, because it's made because of media and schooling,
and
because what we learn in school to be right, or what we learn to be school to be most healthiest or the most advanced is Western medicine. And so people are going to doctors and trusting them and forgetting to trust their own bodies. And the things that are happening is really ridiculous. Like, people are getting paralyzed because they went to the doctor for a shot and now they're paralyzed. And that's what people from the outside who are watching in are not seeing, because they're seeing, oh, that's polio, but they don't understand that that was actually someone who was walking perfectly until they got a shot.
yeah.
Anyway, but I digress. But that's part of it's an issue of this reconnecting, and that's one of the things that I feel like we need to do with the diaspora and on the continent. And that's part of what Wise African Woman is, because when midwives, like when I approached a midwife here to tell her that I was bringing people in, and they wanted to learn from her, and to also I wanted to partner with her with birth workers from over there. She just assumed that people wanted to know like the kind of medications that she gives, and I was like, no, I want to know about the herbs and what you use during birth and things like that, not the pharmaceuticals, but the actual. Here it's called Amasin's medicine is leaf water. I was like, the actual like the actual leaves, the actual things that you use. And so, and when my sisters from the US and elsewhere show that they're interested in things like this, it will encourage my sisters here that this is valuable knowledge. And now with the technology, we can connect easily. And so we need to, so this is part of what my goals are, is to preserve it, to revive it here by saying that, look, because people here really admire, I guess they put into high regard what Westerners think, even Black, all Westerners. And so if they know that people's sisters here are like holding that in high regard, they're gonna be like, they're gonna be more likely to go deeper into it, and and everybody's chasing money, so whatever they want to, whatever can connect to globally,
Exactly.
is what they're gonna hold on to. And so that's part of the reason why I started that the Wise African Woman retreats is to also to help preserve it here, to help people know that that knowledge is so valuable. Yeah.
When I was in South Africa, that it was the first ever that they had all 9 provinces come together. All of the Yababeletisis is a traditional midwife, and Izangoma are the traditional healers. And so they were all coming together, and even the fact that they were there together, the healers and the midwives, because that's what they're doing.
Wow.
And but it was for the same purpose. It was about preserving. You know, I tell people all the time, and another reason why I was so excited to see you and to see what you were doing was like, because we it's not just us, but there are many people on the African continent, because they've been devalued so much. What I saw in South Africa was they were on the path of where we are now, where we've forgotten a lot of the things.
Yes.
Because it's global, like you said. This is a global thing.
Yes.
And the same way our midwives here in the United States were dirty, there's called these names, and you know, even though they have been,
Exactly the same
it's
tactics.
same tactics. Now it's just you going and in your own home place. Like there was a young lady, there's a sister that reached out to me, and she wants to know more about doula work in South Africa. And so she reached out to me, and I, of course, was asking all these questions. But the one I want to say is, wait a minute, you're at home. You know, I want to say it in so many different ways. But what I've learned, if nothing else, what I understand very, very clearly is that the same way that, you know, we're like, oh, we need to learn, you know, the whatevers. Those that are on the continent are being put down for being connected to that. So everybody's trying to position themselves in whatever way. And so I understand that, whereas I might look, and the most special people to me I like to hang out with is a Sangoma and you know, whoever. There are different connotations that are placed on these healers and midwives in their home country.
In their home country, yes.
You know, so it matters. What you're doing is so amazing. It's so good. The opportunity for us to not only learn and make and allow ourselves to be learners, but to have that exchange is amazing.
Yes.
That's really
Yes. And I felt really pushed to do it. I just had to do it. And so, where was I? So, yeah.
But I'm sorry. So you were telling me how you got to the doula thing, and then you had your baby, and then you moved. I think afterwards or something, you moved back.
So yeah. So after I had my daughter, I went to school to finish college just because it was something that I felt I needed to do. And then as a gift to myself, I came back home. So, and that was gonna be my daughter's first time also here. So, so I brought her. No vaccines. I just want to drop that in there. But so we came, and I felt so good here. It had been a while since I came. It had been like over 10 years. And so I felt so good. Like I felt like, and it was good in a way as in like my environment, like the it's funny, like the words you hear, the sounds you hear every day, what you see, you know, all that affects your psyche and your energy and your inspiration. And so I really felt like when I go back, which I was planning to go back to midwifery school or to med school again. And I don't know, it's like hard-headed. And so I was like, I knew that if I go back, I wanted to keep that light feeling that I had, that feeling of just, and and I was more sensitive to it now, especially after finishing college and coming here, because college was really hard. It's in I live in Florida, and I went through an agricultural education program, which is a bunch of redneck, really, uh, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
You got the
that
whole
environment. I
experience.
was like, I don't want to be in that environment anymore. Not even for nothing. I don't want to get paid to be in that environment. I don't want to be in that kind of environment anymore. I want to be around my people somehow, some way. And so, um, and so I started brainstorming and started really, that's when I also started homeschooling, which means I am now looking for ways to get what I want outside of the system. Because everybody was saying, if you want to move back home, this is what everyone was telling me. If you want to move back to Benin, you need to go do your master's or your PhD, find an NGO to work with, or and then you can come back, and that's the path that everyone was telling me. You can't do it otherwise. There's no money back home. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so when I started homeschooling is when I really started to really think differently, as in like, what can I do? There cannot just be one way. There cannot just be NGOs. And I mean, even though there's money in it, there's also, it takes your time, so that you can't even think of doing anything else,
Yes.
um and so I started, looking for ways to do things that won't take my mind, that would that would feed my mental health as much as feed my pocket. And so I did different works. I worked on a farm. I did different works that kind of sat well with me, until they didn't, you know. And then and I sent out a mass email to birth workers and to say who will be interested in coming to Benin to do something. I had the idea and I just sent out a mass email, and then I got really positive response. And so I started to put my energy into that, and writing about it, picturing it, doing putting all my energy into it. And what I did for work was a side job to this was my main focus. So I started figuring it out, but the main thing is to just get here and to make the connections. And so that's what I did. And I want to move here. I've been wanting to move here to stay. And it just so happens that after the retreat, I was like, well, why go back? My lease was up, and why go back? And so I've been here.
How is your family? That is so amazing. How has your family responded to you moving back?
Well, they've been the ones who've been like, you
How to
need
do
to
it?
do it a different way, in a
Gotcha.
different way. You just not, they're not, and the spirit of entrepreneurship is a very African thing. And that's one of the things that I'm realized. Yeah.
Girl,
And
yes.
it is. Everybody, you find out what you can do for your community, you figure out how you can do it and get it out there, and you do it. And it's not about going to work for somebody. That is not an African mentality. But unfortunately, the my parents, and that at least their generation,
Yes.
they're the scholastics and whatever, and that's what they really believe in. And even my siblings, some of them anyway, really believe in that also. So I'm pushing definitely against a lot of those beliefs, and pushing out and figuring it out on my own. They're starting, they're there, but they're not really like, they were not believers from the beginning, and they're not like, so they're really much like a job. You need a damn job. So
And I get that, because even when I started homeschooling, well, that's, of course, like I said, it's the
that's
same.
big too.
It's the same. It was the same concept. It was like, wait a minute, ma'am. My family, my grandmother, my mother was like rural South. She grew up there, so it's red dirt roads on a farm, the whole nine. My dad they were just poor in Alabama, but the whole point was they were the first ones, my mom and dad were the first ones to finish high school, and then go on to college.
Wow.
So that's the bar. And of course, I've gone on to matriculate through the whatever, blah, blah, blah. But just because I did that didn't mean that, so like you imagine, you put your kid, it's like, yeah, I got your daughter, yeah. And I was supposed to be, this is the one, this is the smart one. And then I'm like, yeah, I get my undergrad, I get my master's, and I'm like, you know what? Now I'm going to come home and take care of my kids. I'm going to teach them myself. And they're like,
You're going wayward.
You almost had it. You almost had it, but come back this way. And so many naysayers for so many years.
Yes.
And even if it wasn't where they didn't agree, you just knew they were like, what is she doing? What is she doing? Different people. But in the end, now, I have 2 adult children and 2 that are in high school about to leave. And people are like, oh, yeah, your kids are amazing. Because I taught them to think in their formative years. I got their brains. And I was like, listen, question everything. Question absolutely everything. There is no box for you. There is no this or that for you. And now people are like, oh, that's so great. So since one day people are going to be like, that Moji, I remember when she was homeschooling or unschooling, and she always was special. She was so creative. She was everybody's going to be looking at like, she was on to something.
Yeah, they're going, yep. They'll see.
It's celebrated.
They already see
later.
a little bit. They already see a little bit, even with my daughter, but they
haven't connected it yet.
Exactly.
They just know there's something different about her. Oh, she's very precocious. Oh, she's very, Is she learning? What is she does she have another language under her belt yet? Or is she learning?
She's learning. She's learning because since we're here, she has to learn. And so that's another thing to being here. I love it, and also, but then I love it because I'm also now immersed in the issues of here. I'm not talking as, because we can all say, oh, what Africa needs from a distance, but when you're actually here, you can really connect with the people because, for example, I'm one about, decolonize, but some people here, you can't really talk to them on that level because you're not gonna make any connections, you're not gonna get far. We have to figure out how to talk to people to get them to the same information, but in a different way.
It's just like when I was at the conference in South Africa, I was highly honored. I was one of their main speakers, and I was honored to be there. So I was, people know how to treat you right. Can't nobody treat you right like being on the continent. Yes. I'm serious. I don't know what people think happens here, but till you get treated right on the continent, you don't know what it is to be treated right to you. And so, I was treated, I was with those who were leaders, whether political leaders. Some of them were leaders in their, for their particular, well, Zulus don't call it a tribe, but their nations or their ethnic groups, they were considered to be, still the king or the this or the that. So I'm around these individuals.
Yeah, royalty.
Baby! Yes. What? You just, I just have to take it in. I'm like, okay. But the thing was, she's equivalent of the Queen Mother there. I won't mess up what they called her. I won't mess it up because I think I will mess it up. But her son is actually supposed to be doing in position, but he's not ready. So she's still running things. And she's a nurse. She was a nurse.
Okay.
And one of the things she says to me, she says, listen, you're not here to tell people. You know, I didn't have any clashes, but I definitely, there were those who kind of thought they knew what I might say, you know, based on me being from the United States. So one woman, I love her. One sister, she had some things to say, you know, we're at the table. There's nothing, okay, I won't get off topic because there's nothing like sitting at a table with leaders. And, you know, one of the things that I've learned being on the continent is on the continent, Africans say what they mean and they mean what they say. You know, you're not going to really, you know, if they have something to say, they're going to say it. And I'll say that in contrast to what we have to do here. Where it's like, I can't believe you said that in front of so-and-so and in front of so whatever. No. If I have something to say, I'm going to say it. And that was just, I can't put the word, I don't have a word for it because it was refreshing. And then it was like, what? At the same time, to see people like being very much like, this is what, and I'm going to say these things and say all the things, you understand. And it just made me kind of recalibrate and say, well, what am I doing? Because every word I say, almost, I watch what I say. And, you know, I'm up here making sure I don't offend this one and don't offend that one. And it's not about offense. It's about, this is what I think. Okay. But that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say was the Queen Mother, she came to me. She said, listen, you're not here to tell women to have babies at home and that they should birth at home. That is not why you're here. And I had no intention of doing that. However, she very much stated, you know, what, you know, she says, because the situation here is different. Poverty here looks different. Okay. And I had already known that because my sister there, we had talked about that and how sometimes you'll think that you have a universal message, and especially if you're in the U.S., you know, the U.S., we hate to admit how much the Western culture influences how we think about stuff. But there is this kind of like entitlement, you know, what we think is what everyone should think. And birthing in certain situations, like, you know, when you see these places where people have just basically popped up townships on the side of the road, you know, popped up homes with 10 frames. When you're saying birth at home, that's their home.
Yeah.
Everything is not situated in a certain way. And so I respected that she said it. I don't think I would have said birth at home anyway. I don't think that was my objective. But sometimes, you know, you have to be in that culture to really see what they're dealing with, what's important to them. You know, very seldom is a universal message going to come across the same way.
Exactly, yeah.
And we have to take that. You know.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very, very, very true. And what you said about, yeah, home birth is like, I don't know.
How is it viewed there? Is it you know, like when you say home birth, is it when you think home birth, well, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I mean, home birth here is viewed much like probably in the hood in the US, like as in it's for Maybe not now. Maybe home birth is seen right now here is seen as something that you do
When you can't do.
when you can't go to a good hospital.
Exactly. Exactly.
Even here, people usually go, even if they want to birth, sometimes they'll even go out of the country.
Yes.
It depending on how much, the more money you have,
Yep.
the further away from home you're going, basically. You know, the more money you have, the farther away you go.
And so it's viewed
But
differently. It's not, there is no universal thought. And I think that we should, the people should understand that.
well, but yes, that's definitely true for all cases.
Exactly.
Even I've had issues with birth workers in the U.S. because of um, of stuff like that with when it comes to gender, because people want to speak because I come with gender, especially because my first languages, like we were talking about before, was Fon and Yoruba, which are not gendered languages.
Right.
And also because of the culture is just so different
Yes.
when it comes to gender.
Yes.
And then now that there's all this talk about gender in the US, especially in the birthing community also, um, people want to take not consider the fact that there is a social, even when they say social gender is a social construct, they still feel like it's a universal thing. You know what I'm saying? Like even when they say that, even though they say that gender is a social construct, they still
To
speak
globalize it.
and as
And
it is it's a universal global issue.
yeah.
And even though because of colonization, there are some things that are happening in different things, but like in African countries, like here, gender, the root of it is completely different.
Yes.
And the way that it's manifesting is different. The language around it is different. And the activism around it also has to be different.
Yes.
And so, and the thing is that the US and the Western countries who are very gendered and have a root in like divisive genderism
Yes.
can learn a lot from the countries, African countries and ethnics and languages who are not like that, who were never like that. And so rather than learn, because a lot of people think, African men especially are like the most patriarchal, worse, when it comes to men and women, like they're so, a lot of people have that image anyway.
Yeah.
But without knowing that really in the roots, men and women are more equal.
And
That,
more
that actually,
exactly, it's a complementary relationship.
yes, more complementary.
And when we fail, especially as people of African descent, when we fail, like when we, is what you said, it's the root of it. The root of it, it doesn't start from the same place.
Exactly. Yeah.
So people will look over and say, oh, look at, oh, and yes, there are things that need to be, that people will push back on about certain things. I'm not saying that that's not real. But it doesn't come from the same tree. It's not,
Mm-mm.
it's not from the same place.
Yeah. And
It's,
so the activism you're wording over there, you
it's
can't just take that activism and bring it here and say that people here need to follow what you say because everybody, you got to put a little bit more. It's just different. It's just different.
it's
And so
different.
yeah.
It,
So yeah, it's the same thing with home stuff like home birth. Here it may be better to have like a community birth center place, but definitely not what's happening now where people have to, there's like a clinic miles away and everybody has to go there. We still need more smaller and more
yeah.
within the community spaces, even if people are not having births at home, it still needs to be close to home. And maybe if it's just one space that has water and it has all that stuff that you need, then you can have one building that has that within different communities. But yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
and the other side of that too, is when we cheer here about, oh, so and so they have a hospital. I don't think. Listen, I've been to the hospitals in South Africa. I went to the Dominican Republic where I did some volunteer work for birthing mothers. In the Dominican Republic, at the hospital I was at, even the doctors, the food thing was outside. They gave them an IV so that they were hydrated. They were not given water. We brought Chuck's pads and sheets. The beds did not have sheets.
Oh,
The
yes.
doctors were literally cleaning between, the doctors were cleaning in between things. So I want you to imagine all the things that happen with birth. Everything that can come out came out on that plastic, whatever, okay, that needed to be cleaned up. You didn't just have a Chuck's pad and whatever. No, whatever poop, whatever came out there. And no one was rushing like, oh, let me, get that, make it all pretty and clean. Look, you can be in the hospital here and go through 10 Chuck's pads, within whatever is needed.
Yes.
That is not what it is like when you're somewhere else. There is no, oh, can I get ice chips? Can I get water? When are they going to bring me food? If your family did not bring you food, you had no food. Okay?
Yes.
And so there's also that context that I think about.
Yes.
Universalization and globalization of thinking
hospitals.
Hospital means the same. No, it does not. No, it does not. Not at all.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
no, I'm just saying, like, when we talk about coming at everything from a Western perspective and what the best option is for someone, perhaps home birth is not the thing to say. Maybe their living situation is really, 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 not something conducive or the best thing for them in that instance. Maybe that there are people, but at the same time, do not assume that the opposite end, oh, but if we could get the hospital built, okay,
that everything now will be good. Okay.
There is no cabinet where they keeping sheets. Who's washing the sheets? Who see all of this stuff, the amenities we have, who's washing the sheets?
Because it has to be done by hand. More likely, not machines. And so, but even what you say about not home birth, because I don't know if you've seen the documentary Babies, but you don't necessarily need.
Yeah, I was saying that because of their situation in South Africa.
Yeah, South Africa, yeah, which is
a different one. It's slightly different. It's different because
I get what you. And that's something that we have to say, because poverty, you may not have running water or whatever, but it's more than that. It's in South Africa, when you're in an oppressive space, and then you yourself are oppressed and so your own health, everything all together.
Yes, I'm not, and I'm so glad you said that, because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, if you don't have this, then you shouldn't do home birth. They're dealing with, essentially their oppressors set up camp, okay? So that, in that kind of way, in their land, I would watch people literally going to work. It just amazed me, out of nowhere, it would just be people at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, all walking down the highway, just people. And I didn't even know where they came from. Like, did they just come from the bushes over here? Where did they come from? But because of this, just Black people in uniforms going to work. That's it's a different, I'm speaking in a different way. And the fact that shanty houses and things where the people are building their houses with trash.
Exactly, right.
And where trash is thrown where they are. Right. So it's a different context of what she was telling me She's like, don't just say a blanket, have your baby at home,
Yes.
because there are different things we're dealing with here. And she was being protected. So, but please continue what you're saying about, you know, you don't need all of the fancy. There were years where, you know, all of those things weren't, and we had healthy babies.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that you know, we have to look at the whole situation, the whole situation that's in when it comes to poverty. Poverty doesn't necessarily mean what you have.
Yes.
Like it's also like your mind, your, you know, what's going on in that community and why that community is there. For example, the documentary that I'm saying, you know, it's in they show them a lot. It's a, I don't remember what their name is, the ethnic group, but in Namibia they're the ones with the red clay hair.
Yeah.
So the birth, you know, there's no running water right there where they're birthing. But this community is also they're a community. They're a
healthy,
a very intentional, empowered community with the, you know, it's not like that's where that's their land, and they feel very in control and empowered in that space. So I mean, you know, when you, depending if you go rural spaces, you may see spaces like that where they can have home births.
Yes.
You know, even though it's not, they don't have all what people will think you need to have a home birth in the US. But it really depends on the environment, not necessarily like what you have, or not necessarily if having running water like, you know, on the tap or something like that, you know. So it really, it's different, and I say that because a lot of people, now that I do retreats, I see that people are always saying, oh, Africans, when people come in, they try this, part of the narrative is that you don't know poor until you see Africa poor. And that's not really true. That's not necessarily true, because I feel like a lot of some of the like shanty towns, or even like the government homes, are worse than somebody, because there you may have asbestos, or you may have, you know, there are different things that are man-made and put there that make you sick, and also your whole situation, and that you don't feel that it's not your land, it's not your space. You can even though it's not even a nice space, you can still be kicked out of it at any time. And you know, and there's that mentality that because the government there can give you food stamps or whatever, that you're getting some kind of help, but that's not necessarily true. And what I'm seeing even here is that a lot of the rural areas, those babies are plump and healthy, and mamas are bounced, and you know, they're good and healthy. And because they have that, and there's a lot to be said for having that community around you, and that's so important. Like feeling like you are at home, like you know, feeling like even if you don't know where your next dollar is gonna come from, you know that there's something, you know, that your neighbors have corn or some, you know that there's, you know that there's, you know, you're not necessarily as mentally worried about everything. And even though the government isn't giving you money or whatever, you still have, because this is you. And you know, and I don't want to and that's all part of, you know, us being in a colonized land, that it's not in the US, even no matter what, it's not our land. So we can't really have ownership of it as Africans can. And I'm not trying to look down on that, you know, or dismiss that aspect, that, you know, that we in a Black American situation, you can't really take ownership of the land sometimes, because it's just, there's not the resources aren't there for you to take ownership of the land. And but just having the community, and then also maybe this is the things that you can start thinking about to actually take ownership of some land in Africa, because land is cheaper here. People, there's in the rural areas. I mean, and when I say Africa is the future, there's so much land, there's so much space that I feel like if we start thinking out of the box a little bit and start letting go of a little bit of what we think are luxuries, and start that we can really start building communities and taking ownership of some land. You know, even if it's not in the U.S., take ownership of some land, because that's so important. That's one of the things that brings so much stress to people: being kicked
Yeah,
out, being homeless, being, you know, and making rent, making all the bills and all that. You know, if that it's I mean, this is that's, it's not for everybody, but I mean,
it's
if
an
some people
option.
can think about that, it's an
Yeah,
option that you can start thinking about.
and we don't, and a lot of times we act as if, you know, like my grandparents, they left us is they split up some of the stuff. My sisters and I have 5.5 acres in Alabama. And
Yes.
even to be able to say that and to know that there are other relatives of mine who have more, like on this colonized land, right? Even the thought, even when we were younger and understanding, um, I would tease, and I was like, listen, if all else fails, I know we got 5.5 acres. If I want to pitch a tent on it down there, I can go pitch a tent.
Yes.
I can go pitch a tent. You know, we had a
Lord.
well, so there was a well with you know, that when we were really little, they used the well and things like that. So there is something about, you know, having ownership of something and saying, okay,
Mhm.
this is mine, and it is different. You're so right. The whole concept of community. I think when we say community now in the United States, I don't even know what that means when they say the Black community. I think it's been so diluted, but
Mm.
you know, 50 or 60 years ago, before integration, before we had options to not have to be bothered with each other, um, and we knew that really we were all we had, then you know, you were mentioned like, oh, I know my neighbor has corn. Look, my grandmother they lived on this dirt road with the siblings, all the siblings, and the different ones of them grew different foods. And there was
Nice.
always food. There was
Mhm.
food is not the thing I remember us not having,
Is that, yeah? That's
you know.
beautiful. Yeah. Mhm.
So it's like, you know, whatever I appreciate so much you talking about, you know, if we're willing to give up what we consider luxuries. Um,
Mhm.
and remembering that, you know, particularly for those who have ancestors that were trafficked across the Atlantic on slave ships, all of these luxuries that you're enjoying anyway are based on free labor. None of the foundation
Mhm.
of it could be built without labor. And so many of us function over here now is like, how can I do the least amount of work? You know, while people call, you know, Black people lazy and all these other words, there's literally this there is built on the notion of how could I do the least amount of work? Oh, I know. I'll bring these people from over here, won't pay them anything, whatever, and that's how I'll get everything. And I don't have to work. And we don't realize that, you know, that's part of that Western concept that the more whatever I am, the less I have to work. And we don't understand how that ties also into our health issues, you know.
Mhm.
'Cause if
Mhm.
I don't have to work, I don't have to move. Ooh, good thing I don't have to pick up anything. I don't have to do anything. You know, I don't have to walk anywhere. I don't have to do this thing. So
Right.
it's all connected. Okay,
Mhm.
tell me, what does birth work look like over there in Benin? Are you doing the work over it, or does it look different for you?
Um, pretty much being s- s- it, on the same track as the Western world, as in there's nurse midwives, there's a clinic. There are local clinics that are for, you know, the local people. That's seen as, you don't go there if you cannot
Money.
go there.
Yeah.
And I've had an opportunity to see a procedure done there. And yeah, it's just like you described. You have to bring your own sheets, your own everything to the, it was an interesting experience that even my daughter got sick recently. I was like, and I don't
Yeah.
go to doctors anyway, but I was like, I'm definitely not going there just because if you're already sick and tired and all that, that's not gonna make you feel any better.
No, it's not. I mean, it really isn't. It's a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
So with your work with the midwives, do you work with them as
Yes.
far as like, have you built a relationship with them where they let you help?
So I am working with a midwife here who is a traditional midwife. She has a clinic in her home, as part of her home.
What do they
And
call, what do they call midwives there?
it's actually funny because they call them doto.
Doctor.
Doto. So it's kind of like doctor, but it's not.
Yeah.
Doctors are called something else. It's called
Okay.
doto. So yeah, so she is, to be a midwife in that sense, you do apprenticeship, and so you learn under another midwife, and so she did that. I really admire her because she wanted to do that because she wanted to be able to be home and be a mother, and so she has her home clinic. A lot of people know her. She's she has that energy, that caring energy, that you can just tell that she's a midwife. And so I'm studying under her, and people who come for the retreat will be learning with her and learning. I have pictures on the website where she has all kinds of the clay pots, medicinal pots that she brews medicines in for her clients during labor and also to take home with them. And her husband is an herbalist, and so they work together, which was really really beautiful to see also. Recently, they had new regulations that she had to put tile floors on in her office and build a new door. So she had to close her practice in order to do that. But now I just saw her. She came the other day, and I'm actually helping her raise money through a GoFundMe. But
Make sure that I get that information. I don't know
okay.
if I would love to have that information. Okay.
I'll send it to you. So she's starting to tile, but she's opening her doors up, and so that people can. She's opening her doors up, and and I'm studying under her, and people who come here with the retreat will also be experiencing and learning through her. So there's that dynamic. There's the traditional midwives, and then there's the nurse midwives, and then there's also doctors. And so that's basically how birth works here.
I just want to say how excited I am for you that you were able to go back home and, learn and apprentice under her. And I'm imagining you in like 15, 20 years, just, and thank you for being willing to build a bridge. Before we go, I want to ask you this. You mentioned earlier, you said, I really wanted to connect with my people. And a lot of times, people that are born in the diaspora, especially those who have ancestors that were brought there against their will, in their mind, they're like, oh, you can't, those, I would often say continental Africans or whatever, you can't, they don't like us African American, whatever's don't like this and other, and it hasn't been my experience. I think people are people, and I think that people connect in certain ways, but it hasn't been my experience that I've been shunned or anything like that. When you say I wanted to connect with my people, can you just, I don't know how to want to ask this. I want to ask you to comment on it, but I would also like for you to kind of express it in a way that some some Black people that are not connected yet, maybe never encountered someone who's like, who was still connected to their ancestral roots and was like, I see you as my people as well, and I want to connect with my people. So I'm trying to frame my question in the right way. But like, maybe if you just share what that meant and why was that important to you? You know, why was it important to you to even think in that along those lines or anything like that? And what would you say to those who would love to reconnect but are just a little cautious about whether they would be accepted?
Yeah, so lots of well, what it meant for me personally to say that I want to connect with my people is that because I was born here and was here for the first 9 years of my life, I felt like I had been away for a long time. Like like I was saying, like the sounds and the even the way, the culture, the walking, people walk a lot. I feel more, and even the way of life, I'm not as stressed, and the connections that you have every day, just because that's just how the the culture is that you have to talk to people every day. You can't, you even when you go to the market, you have to, haggle. You get to know people. You just are more talking to people more. It's just a whole different kind of culture that I have been taken from, and then also put into a society where I was kind of indoctrinated to not value it as much, and to not associate value with it. And so yeah, so that was what for me it was. I needed to come back and then to be around, because that was what made me so much happier, so much happier to wake up in the morning, because I was really having a hard time. And also, especially since the way I am, I was already going away from working for someone, that mentality, and not happy doing it. And so I was having a hard time making money in the US because I just hated all the kind of works that were. So I had a lot of stress in the US, and so for me, what that's all that encompassed, me being more closer to my people, encompassed all of that. But also, as someone who grew up in the US, I also understand what people feel, and even though it hasn't been your experience, I know that I've known Africans who would talk down about Black Americans, but that's not something that's necessarily a norm. But I'm just saying that people who do feel that way are not necessarily just making it up, but it could also be their own unhealed. Because I've also seen there's a lot of unhealed feelings between the two cultures. And so as an African who was born here and lived here for a few years before going to the US, I didn't know much about Black Americans. And so it's like, and that's part of the issues, is that the education system that we're relying on to teach us about ourselves and our history is dividing us. It's literally, that's what it is, because the education system here, again, it talks about, of course, slavery and the colonialism from the European point of view, and then it stops after the ship leaves the country. It doesn't even, like, I'm digging up and trying to learn. Even the tours that they have here, a lot of people, like the city that I'm in now, is a city where people, it's on the port where people actually were taken, and there's a whole you can tell as where they were taken from, where they were kept, and then the walk to the to the um, to the ocean,
Yeah.
to the port. And so, but people, and we have there are days and events that are surrounding like remembering and
Oh,
commemorating, but they're not, they don't include the diaspora. It's usually done for European tourists, which is really weird to me. And then they don't include stories of the diaspora. And so there's a real disconnect, which causes a lot of issues. So that's part of what I actually want to do here. I want to connect with the people who do those commemorations and those events to bring more stories of the diaspora, of actually what happened after, and so that we can get more real
yeah.
in the storytelling and in the commemorations that we have. But what I will tell people who feel like they don't have a connection is that it's work. It's something that if you want it, you have to work towards it, and because and if you value it, you have to just you have to work towards it and put that energy, positive energy into it, and it will come back to you. It will definitely come back to you they're because it's there. So as long as you put the positive energy
Yes.
to 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 heal, and then also to learn and to feel that community with the continent, you'll feel it. You will. And so that's the work. And it's the same kind of work I had to do to connect with Black people in the US, because I as an African, the white community surrounded me. It was like, I had to like push myself out of there because, you're different. Like if you're not conscious enough and really dig deep and know that you want to connect with this group of people who look like you can get lost in that sea of whiteness. You know what I'm saying? And so it's the same thing. You don't get lost in the sea of negativity about what Africans think, or about you not fitting in, or anything like that. You gotta make up your own mind, because we know ourselves. We know that we are a community. So
Yes.
you just gotta hold on to that, and then do the work within yourself, and also reach out to people who will make you feel positive about it, and you will find a connection to the continent.
Ah, this was everything I thought it would be, my sister.
Thank you.
How can people get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you?
So I have my handle, which is on the my name, Deschooling Doula, on IG, and my website is littlebylittlebirth.com.
That is
And
that. You're on Instagram too, right? Look,
yes, that's Deschooling Doula. That's me.
that's okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, and then littlebylittlebirth.com.
Okay. I just want to thank you again. This has just been really special for me, and I appreciate it so much. Those of you
Yeah.
all who want to learn more about what she does, perhaps it'll be your time to go on the retreat, to go to and have this learning experience next year. Who knows? Go check her out on littlebylittle.com, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she just has all these little things that she does. It's just wonderful offerings, and I'm just so grateful for you. Thank you for the work you're doing, sis. Thank you for reaching back, and not just reaching back to your home, but then pulling us as well, because we need the bridges. We need the
Yes.
bridges, and we need those who are like who are willing to help us to get back over there. I had someone tell me, they said the best thing to do is to be invited. And what you're
Mm.
doing is you're inviting. There was an African brother
Mm.
from Mali. He said, don't go as a tourist. He said, the best thing is to get invited. Because if you're invited, you'll experience real what it really is. And so I just want to thank you for inviting all of us, inviting us to reconnect. It means more than you know. And I'm looking forward to the time when I can take advantage of it.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it too. From one bridge to another, because you're also building bridge. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much, sis. All right, you guys, if you want to know more about this beautiful Moji, you make sure that you see her information below. Other than that, mwah, my sister, I love you. I love you. You guys, I love you. I love you. All those who are listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. This birthed her story. I hope you have enjoyed it. I know I have. See you later.
Bye, y'all.